So again, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with Romeo and Juliet, but if not, all-time spoiler alert, they die. Uh, Romeo and Juliet, a book passage on the Titanic, and no, wait a minute, that's another Leonardo DiCaprio movie, but somehow they die. But anyway, we'll get to that. I'll make some general remarks about Romeo and Juliet and the courtly love tradition on Thursday. So I hope that works out for everybody. Anyway, I'll try to get as far as I can towards finishing Henry V today, but I suspect I may still be talking about the scene where he courts Princess Catherine, and above all, I have to talk about the whole scene in French, and that I may have to reserve for next time, but it will be a good introduction to Romeo and Juliet. So we're finally finishing up on these 4 history plays. If Shakespeare had died in 1599, aside from being the greatest cultural tragedy in history, we might think these were the greatest plays ever written. It's really only by the standard of Shakespeare that they ever got surpassed, and it's interesting to remember that if Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, and Macbeth had never been written, we wouldn't know about them. We wouldn't be able to imagine them. And these are extraordinary plays. I'm trying to show you how the way they move between comedy and tragedy, they are so brilliant on the local level. A line like, "I would have blown up the town, so Christ save me." Nobody else could have written that. But I've also tried to show you the magnificent constructive power in Shakespeare. At a minimum, he's tied together 3 plays here. I would argue, 4 plays. It's a question how completely Richard II fits into the pattern. But in any case, to put together 3 or 4 plays on this scale, it's really astounding. And also, I've been trying to show you the depth of thought in them and the understanding of politics. So, to show you where we've gotten here from Richard II to Henry V, in Richard II, we see the problems with medieval kingship. The king is weak. He shares power with the powerful barons and with the Catholic Church. And what we've been seeing is the process by which someone can come to the throne, Henry V, and have solved those problems. We've seen how Henry has the church behind him in the first scene, and how he gives the nobles something to satisfy them. The problem we're seeing in Richard II is the nobles have all this spiritedness, this thumos, and they're all dressed up in armor with no place to go except to fight each other. Henry V has the good Machiavellian idea to send them off to fight in France. Give them a chance to express all that energy and to win honor and win rewards and have a satisfactory life as nobles without having to challenge the king. And that's really the genius that Henry V has brought about here. A lot of it has to do with the simple killing off of some of the prominent nobles. The Percy family isn't looking too good at this point, and you just get rid of some of them, and then you can manage the rest of them. We're actually seeing an ongoing process here. Again, Shakespeare-written plays through the reign of Henry VI and Richard III, to the point where Henry VII came to the throne. And as a result, we're actually seeing, in effect, anticipations of the Tudor dynasty. That passage at the beginning of Act 5, I think, is so wonderful. The one where the chorus compares Henry V's return from Agincourt to London with a Roman Caesar in triumph and with the Earl of Essex. At that point, they were hoping he'd come home in triumph from Ireland. I know of no passage that does a better job of giving you a sense of what the Renaissance was about. And it really shows you the 3 time levels that Shakespeare has in mind in writing these plays. He's writing about the events in the realm during the reigns of Henry IV and Henry V. But he sees parallels to what's happening in his own day in the story of the Earl of Essex, and he also refers us back to classical antiquity and great events in Rome. And so on one level, the Roman parallels are there to suggest, I would argue, a attempt to remodel the English kingship on a Roman model. Now, Rome was famous for not having kings during the era of the Republic, and for having a so-called mixed regime or mixed constitution, which combined a monarchic, a aristocratic, and a democratic element. That is, briefly, in the era of the Roman Republic, the country was led by two consuls. They were mainly the generals of the armies in war. There was a Senate, but the idea was that the consuls supplied the monarchic, the kingly element in the regime. It helped that you had two of them, and so neither one could become too powerful, but they were executives. Their chief function was military. You had the Senate, which was composed of the great aristocratic landowners. And then you had the plebeians of Rome, who were represented in the government by a set of tribunes, who had the right to veto actions taken by the Senate, and so on. And that supplied the democratic regime in Rome. This was already in classical antiquity analyzed as a mixed regime in writers like the Greek historian Polybius, but Machiavelli definitely revived the study of Rome as a mixed regime in his discourses on Livy. And I think Shakespeare is thinking of England, moving England in that direction. And Henry V is his model of a great king for just that reason. Henry supplies the kingly element in the regime, and he is a great warrior, a great leader in battle. At the same time, he does not exclude the nobles from his regime. He makes them his counselors. As I said, he gives them something to do to satisfy their noble impulses. And also there is this democratic component in his regime, not formalized the way it is in Rome with the tribunes, but we've seen from the beginning that Hal has the popular touch. He's learned to drink with his people in their own language. And I think Shakespeare emphasizes that. We'll see that in a minute in the scene the eve before the Battle of Agincourt. And I think he was trying to rethink the Roman regime, the English regime on a Rome model, with the ideas if England could get this kind of mixture in its regime, maybe it could go on to win a great empire. So I do think these plays have a lesson for the English monarchy. It's hard to tell how much they listened. England did develop off and on monarchs who took into account the people, and in case you haven't noticed, they still have a monarch, unlike many countries in Europe, which suggests that the English monarchs figured out something. Of course, they became Dutch monarchs and then German monarchs, but by birth. But maybe they learned something from Shakespeare's plays. I would not underestimate the effect these plays had in shaping the way the English understand themselves. Certainly the way someone like Richard II is viewed by the English, or Richard III, very much shaped by the way Shakespeare chose to portray these monarchs, and even Henry V. It's kind of curious in the case of Essex how he interpreted the plays, if he did at all. I would say that he misinterpreted them. So an interesting reference to the Essex Rebellion as the last gasp of the feudal regime in England, that by leading this rebellion against Elizabeth, Essex was trying to be the new Bolingbroke and overthrow Richard II. Elizabeth did have a unique liability being a woman on the throne. She was a very effective monarch, one of the most effective in the history of England, but she was a woman and could not lead her armies into battle. It doesn't sound like a problem to us, and it ultimately wasn't a problem to her, but up until then it had been thought quite standard that if you were the monarch, you actually led your armies into battle, as we see the case of Henry V. And it was, to some extent, a weakness of Elizabeth's position. She would occasionally review the troops, and they'd stage some event that would make her look military, some kind of Elizabethan photo op. But basically, she was dependent on men like Essex to lead her troops in battle, and she, looked fatally dependent on them to some, like Essex. And again, I think he misread the plays. Again, famously, Elizabeth said, "I am that Richard," of Richard II, when Shakespeare's company was tricked into staging it on the eve of Essex Rebellion. I think Shakespeare was indeed supporting the emergence of a centralized monarchy in this series of plays, and that his lesson to someone like Essex would be, don't try to overthrow the queen. Try to participate, as you have been doing, in the military actions of the Elizabethan regime. And if we all get behind Elizabeth, maybe we can start up a grand empire on a Roman model. So again, I think it's fair enough to look for contemporary relevance of these plays for Shakespeare's day. It's a little hard to pin them down, and Essex may be a case of someone who misread the plays. So, to get back to the text of the play and try to finish up here, if you turn to page 17, this is Act 1, Scene 2, line 241, "We are no tyrant but a Christian king." In a way, that's the central motif of this play. For one thing, what that means is we are not a usurper, we are not illegitimate. We are not a tyrant. We're now the legitimate king. That was the great hope that Henry IV had for his son, and here it is in place. But I think it goes beyond it with this idea of a Christian king. Now, that's a problematic idea, as I've been suggesting. I'm just going to go back here to the Henry VI plays. Now, again, early in his career, Shakespeare wrote another tetralogy, the three Henry VI plays and Richard III. It's very interesting to read those plays, although I'm not asking you to do it. They are clearly inferior to this set of plays. They are very early, perhaps the first plays Shakespeare wrote, and the first plays that made him a big success. They are, in our terms, I would say, very melodramatic. They almost have the character of a soap opera. It's one scene after another of someone betraying someone, and the person betrayed lamenting, "Oh, you awful traitor," and the traitor saying, "Ha, ha, 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 I won." They're very rhetorical. The verse is not as good as Shakespeare's later plays. The poetry, the great poetry, is not there. Even the constructive ability isn't quite there. The drama is a little clunky by his later standards. What is interesting to me is the political thought is there. It's almost as if that's the first thing Shakespeare got right. The issues are the same we've been seeing in these plays. There are nefarious and rebellious members of the Catholic Church. There are weak kings and strong usurpers, and all of that stuff we've been seeing. And in particular, these plays from the very beginning raise the issue of religion and politics. Joan of Arc is a character in part one. You would be very shocked to see how she's portrayed. By no means as a heroine. But remember, it's an English play being written about the French, and she was a heroine to the French, not to the English. But it's very strange for us to see his portrayal of Joan of Arc. Anyway, in Henry VI, Part 2, his queen, Queen Margaret, says this of Henry VI, why he is unfit to be a king, but all his mind is bent to holiness, to number Ave Marys on his beads. His champions are the prophets and the apostles. His weapons, holy saws of sacred writ. His study is his tilt yard, and his loves are brazen images of canonized saints. I would this is an incredible line. I would the College of Cardinals would choose him Pope and carry him to Rome. Pope is not too popular in these plays, and set the triple crown upon his head, that were a state to fit for his holiness. Remember, these plays may have been written 1 year after the Spanish Armada attempted to retake England for Catholicism. And later in the same play, Henry VI, Part 2, the usurper York, who takes the crown away from Henry VI, says this of that pious Christian king Henry VI, that head of thine doth not become a crown, thy hand is made to grasp a palmer's staff, that would be a pilgrim's staff, and not to grace an awfully princely scepter. That gold must round and girt these brows of mine, whose smile and frown, like to Achilles' spear, is able with the change to kill and cure. These are amazing passages as early as the very beginning of Shakespeare's career, when he's basically saying, you know what makes a good king? Achilles. Not a Christian. And the whole problem, now Henry VI is the son of Henry V, and somehow didn't inherit his father's warlike nature or didn't develop it. So again, from the very beginning of his history plays, Shakespeare presents the problematic of a Christian king. So we have to ask ourselves, how does Henry pull it off? And here I'm going to read the next two lines. So back on page 17, Act 1, Scene 2, line 241, we are no tyrant but a Christian king, unto whose grace our passion is as subject as is our wretches fettered in our prisons. This is very Platonic. This is the idea that Henry V has his soul in order. His passions do not run wild. They're under control. They're prisoners. Prisoners to what? To his reason. And we've heard him in the preceding scene discussed as if he were a Platonic philosopher king. This is one of the many respects in this play that point to the idea that what makes a great king is his having his own little kingdom in order, the kingdom of his soul, and from that he can order the larger external kingdom. But this is very close to the notion of Plato's Republic, which is all about order in the soul and order in the city, and what's wrong with the tyrannic soul and that sort of thing. And so Henry is aware of all these contradictory demands upon a king, above all the contradictory demands of war and peace. As we've seen, he understands that in peace you need to be like a lamb, but in war you need to be like a tiger. It's very difficult to combine the natures of the lamb and the tiger in one person. The way Henry does it is through the control of his reason. It means that he acts these parts. As I've been trying to suggest, he knows how to appear in public. And so returning to where we left off in the play, if you'll turn to page 51, the siege of Harfleur, this is Act 3, Scene 3. Let's pick up around line 10. He wants to take this town. He wants to take it as easily as possible, but he is prepared for the nuclear option. And so line 10, in addressing the mayor and the city, the gates of mercy shall be all shut up. You know, he is a Christian king. He can be merciful, but he knows when to turn off the mercy. The gates of mercy shall be shut up, and they will really be shut up. And the fleshed soldier, rough and hard of heart, in liberty of bloody hand shall range, with conscience white as hell, mowing like grass your fresh fair virgins and your flowering infants. What is it then to me if impious war? Again, Christian kings, fully Christian kings, can't conduct impious war, but Henry can set it loose. If impious war, arrayed in flames like to the prince of fiends, do with his smirched complexion all fell feats and linked to waste and desolation? What is it to me when you yourselves are cause if your pure maidens fall into the hand of hot enforcing violation? So here's the consistent strategy we've seen of Henry. It's not my fault, it's yours. Remember with Canterbury, it's not my responsibility if we go to war with France, it's yours. With those nobles in the second act, I'm not failing to show mercy. You guys have told me I shouldn't show mercy. And so again here he maneuvers things so that Harfleur is in the position where they can either decide to surrender without a fight, or they can endure the most brutal form of warfare that will result in the rape and pillage of their city. And unable to get reinforcements from the French, Harfleur surrenders. And so Henry said, this is now page 52, so still Act 3, Scene 3, line 54, use mercy to them all. He can turn it on and off. 1 minute he can be merciful, the next minute he can be impious and cruel, and the next minute he can be merciful again. That's not very easy. If you have either a cruel or a merciful nature. The notion seems to be that Henry has something above that, those portions of his nature, and I'd argue that's his reason and control of his passions. And we see this demonstrated again just a little later on page 62. So this would be Act 3, Scene 6. Act 3, Scene 6, about line 105, we learn that Bardolph, our friend Bardolph, is like to be executed for robbing a church. And this is a difficult moment in a way for us because Henry consents to the execution. Line 112, we would have all such offenders so cut off, and we give express charge that in our marches through the country there be nothing compelled from the villages, nothing taken but paid for, none of the French upbraided or abused in disdainful language, for when lenity and cruelty play for a kingdom, the gentler gamester is the soonest winner. Now this is pretty admirable in a wartime leader. He is trying to reduce what we now call the collateral damage. I don't want civilians injured. I don't want property taken. I want this to be what we now call a surgical strike. And moreover, he displays remarkable impartiality here. This is a friend of his who's going to be executed, and he won't intervene to save him. Now, at the same time, that rubs us the wrong way. I've been talking to some of you about how you don't like Henry V as much as you like Prince Hal. And this is a good way of seeing why. There's something very cold-blooded about this man sending his friend to death here. On the other hand, it's what a king has to do. And again, you see here the tragedy of politics here, that the demands of politics on Henry here are directly counter to the demands of friendship on him. He has to choose between the two. In some ways, he does make a tragic choice here. We feel it more strongly in the rejection of Falstaff and the way that's led to Falstaff's death. On the other hand, this is what a king has to do, and we can admire him for this policy. And notice again the top of 63, so line 117. For when lenity and cruelty play for a kingdom, he is always aware of these two sides that he has to play against each other, being lenient and merciful or being cruel. Now he says that lenity, mercy is better, but it is very practical. The gentler gamester is the soonest winner. This is not him saying, but my Christian nature means we have to be merciful. It's this strategy is going to work better. We are going to conquer France all the better if we appear to be merciful when we need to be. As you'll see later in the play, he opts for the nuclear option when necessary. But this is all very difficult, and you need to be cold-blooded to make decisions like this. He does not make decisions in the heat of passion. I'll get to an example where you may think I'm wrong, but the overall impression is someone who is very calculating and does what he needs to do at all moments. Now, where we really left off last time was Act 4, where Henry was going among his troops on the eve of the battle of Agincourt. As I said, this is an extraordinary moment to show a king moving among his people. It really is the payoff for all those years he paid in Eastcheap. And he does have the common touch. This is page 72. So the chorus of Act 4, line 47, a little touch of Harry in the night. This is a famous line. This is his common touch. He can approach the soldiers on their own level. A colleague of mine has reversed to this saying, a little touch of the knight in Harry. And it's well to remember the other side of this. Yes, he's got the common touch, but there's something Machiavellian about this man as well. This common touch is stressed by the contrast with the French in the play. As I showed you last time, the French are very distinctly portrayed as aristocratic warriors, full of themselves as grandees and writing sonnets to their horses and so on, and really not caring about their common people or the common soldiers in their army. If you turn to page 58, this is Act 3, Scene 5, about line 46, we have here the king addressing all his nobles. He knows his nobles by name, or at least by title. Line 46, high dukes, great princes, barons, lords, and knights. He never says a thing to the common people. We'll look at the St. Crispin's Day speech in a minute, but you've seen it already, that Henry always makes a point of addressing his common soldiers, giving them an incentive in the war, giving them credit in the war. The French couldn't care less about their common people. This is page 85, Act 4, Scene 2, about line 25. When the constable is trying to show how strong the French are, he says, even our peasants could beat you guys. Line 26, that our superfluous lackeys and our peasants, who in unnecessary action swarm about our squares of battle, were enough to purge this field of such a hilding foe. Man, that's not showing respect for the troops. They are superfluous lackeys, they're peasants, and they swarm in unnecessary action. Henry makes a point of giving credit to the common soldiers, and as I'll explain to you, they had a great role, indeed, in winning the battle. The French really are portrayed as standing for the old medieval world in the play. And this play completes that transition from the medieval to the modern world that Shakespeare's portraying in these plays. So let's go back to Act 4, and Henry goes out among his troops. As I said, this is a very significant moment, the fact that Henry has to disguise himself to go among his men. This is a theme that Shakespeare emphasizes again and again. We've been seeing the theme of flattery. One of the great disabilities of kingship is getting to know the truth. And it really, Shakespeare presents it as going with the territory. The problem for so many rulers is that people won't speak the truth to them. You don't want the king to know what you're really thinking. Above all, kings want to hear what they want to hear, and so people tell them what they want to hear. And we saw it in Richard II. We saw Hal trying to avoid it. We'll see it as an issue in As You Like It, and especially in King Lear, that kings have limited access to the truth. By the very nature of their power, people are overwhelmingly tempted to lie to them. and tell them what they want to hear. So Henry reprises his strategy in part one here of disguising himself so he can go out among the troops. And a number of interesting developments occur. For one thing, he does learn that his troops are not convinced of the justice of his cause. This is the bottom of page 77. When pretending to be just another soldier, Act 4, Scene 1, about line 128, the king, this is what we would call a trial balloon here, a feeler. Methinks I should not die anywhere so contented as in the king's company, his cause being just and his quarrel honorable. And then William says, that's more than we know. Henry learns a very interesting thing here, that his soldiers are not convinced of the justice of their cause. And then, moreover, he learns, I won't go through this whole complicated dialogue on page 78 and 79, but he learns that the troops are thinking, in any case, it's not our responsibility. Whether the king's cause is just or not, we don't know, and we just go into battle as loyal to the king, and let the opprobrium, let the onus fall on him. Now notice that's the exact opposite of the strategy Henry's pursued throughout this play. He's always gotten everybody else to take the responsibility for what he's doing. And so, needless to say, he's not very happy with this situation, and he goes through a long argument to convince the soldiers that they're wrong. I think this argument is deliberately presented as specious, that the analogy he draws is manifestly false, that when someone sends someone on an errand, it's not the same as sending someone into war, because dying is an accidental part of just a mere errand, but dying is a pretty integral part of going to war. In any case, I think Shakespeare is smart enough to know the fallacious nature of this argument, so it's probably another Falstaffian moment in Henry V, where we see how he has learned from that master sophist, Falstaff. He's learned from the man who could make the false argument appear the true here. And he does succeed in getting the troops to take moral responsibility. Now, that's probably a good idea, especially when Henry doesn't like collateral damage, and he wants to be able to say his troops used the minimum of force to win. They didn't go off and rape and pillage. And so he wants them to take responsibility. And on page 79, so still in Act 4, Scene 1, about line 81, he makes the remarkable statement, every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. Strikes me as a remarkably Protestant statement. I'm not making a comment here on Shakespeare's own religious beliefs, which I don't think we have access to, but in terms of the movement from the medieval to the modern world, that's a very modern statement. Every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. That would be the culmination of what I'm calling the Lancastrian Reformation in the play. Remember when Henry IV said, I don't care about your souls, I'm just going to punish your bodies. The medieval world with which we begin in Richard II is very much a world saturated with divinity and spirituality and soul, where body and soul go together, and soul is very much a part of politics, and the model of a political action is a crusade, in which you go to fight to recover the Holy Land to save your soul. Shakespeare raises real questions about crusades in these plays, in general, about politics motivated by religion, about the fanaticism that results from this. This is a lesson which is not lost on us in the world today. And so this is very much in line with what we saw in Bolingbroke. This is, I've been talking about separation of church and state here. Every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. It seems to be setting off a private realm of conscience here. That there's this public realm where you have public duties and you're loyal to your king, but what goes on in your own soul is up to you. That's a principle which has been embraced by liberal democracies. And in some ways, this is one of the earliest articulations I know of it. It's quite a remarkable passage in that sense. And indeed, Henry manages to get his troops to take seriously their own moral obligations. Now, he really works very well with his troops here. We've seen that one issue is the nationalities he's commanding, that his coalition that will allow him to win this battle is of Englishmen, Welshmen, Irishmen, and Scottish. And so he plays the Welsh card. Page 75, we see it begin. This is Act 4, Scene 1 with Pistol. Act 4, Scene 1, line 51. When he's asked if he's Cornish, he says, "No, I'm a Welshman." And that turns out to be quite important to him because Llewellyn is a Welshman, and Llewellyn's one of his captains. And so on page 76, so still Act 4, Scene 1, line 85, though it appear a little out of fashion, there is much care and valor in this Welshman. And Henry stands up for the Welsh in his army because he needs their loyalty, and it's fortunate that he was Prince of Wales and claims to have been born there. Line 101, Shakespeare keeps up this motif. This is Act 4, Scene 7. This is Llewellyn talking about. This is Act 4, Scene 7, line 100 to 101. The Welshmen did good service. And then line 107, Henry says, "For I am Welsh, good countrymen. All the water and wine cannot wash your Majesty's Welsh blood out of your body, I can tell you that." And as part of this, the Tudors had Welsh origins, Henry of Monmouth, and so it's this attempt: how do you unite the kingdom? Well, the king has to be open to these nationalities, and so this culminates on page 113 when Pistol and Llewellyn are arguing. Pistol triumphs, and Gower says, this is page 113, Act 5, Scene 1, about line 77. "You thought because he could not speak English in the native garb, he could not therefore handle an English cudgel. You find it otherwise, and henceforth let a Welsh correction teach you a good English condition. Fare you well." And the play takes the side of a Welshman against an Englishman, and it's part of integrating this truly national army that will allow England to conquer the French. Several other interesting aspects of Henry's behavior in this act. Again, all of this contributes to his ability to win the Battle of Agincourt. Page 77. So Act 4, Scene 1, about line 103. And remember, he's in disguise here. "I speak it to you, I think the king is but a man, as I am." Now, of course, that's literally true. He is the king, but no one knows this around him. He's disguised as Thomas Erpingham. "I think the king is but a man as I am. The violet smells to him as it doth to me. The element shows to him as it doth to me. All his senses have but human conditions. His ceremonies laid by, in his nakedness he appears but a man. And as though his affections are higher mounted than ours, yet when they stoop with the like wing. Therefore, when he says reason of fears as we do, his fears out of doubt be of the same relish as ours. Yet in reason no man should possess him with any appearance of fear, lest he by showing it should dishearten his army." Now, for one thing, we see he's learned a lesson here that Richard II didn't know. Richard II, who lost his whole position because he showed weakness in front of his own troops and despaired in battle. Henry's doing everything right that Richard II did wrong here. But even more remarkably is this statement, "the king is but a man." We've seen this tendency in these plays that one thing Shakespeare does is to reduce kings to human beings. One of the remarkable effects of these plays is to show that these great kings and queens and princes and dukes, they are just human beings. It's that point that I said Franco Moretti makes in his essay about sovereignty, that these plays succeeded in deconsecrating the kingship. By the way, Moretti was here yesterday, this very podium. He gave a lecture. Not if it had been on Shakespeare, I would have told you to come to it, but it was on digital humanities instead. But anyway, it was great to see Franco yesterday. But here's that point. His ceremony is laid by in his nakedness. He appears but a man. Now, what's remarkable here is that Henry realizes this himself. He does not need to be stripped naked to be reminded of his nakedness. In Richard II's case, it was a very painful and imposed process. Richard never came to these conclusions of his own volition. He had to be deposed. He had to be humiliated. He had to be stripped naked, really, before he understood this. And it's good that he eventually understood it, but it's a much more limited recognition in those cases because he can't do anything about it. Remember, he always says, if I'm a beggar, I'm not a king. If I'm a king, I'm not a beggar. I can't be both. But we're seeing that Henry, again, because of this almost philosophical versatility of mind, this is philosophical on his part. He's thought this through himself. Now, he is under threat here. Remember, his father, Henry IV, came to similar conclusions on the verge of death. That we heard Henry IV talking about the humanity of the king and how weak he could be. Again, that's under the pressure of death. Now, Henry V is under great pressure here. He's going into a battle that he has every reason to think he's going to lose. Still, speaks in prose here, he speaks calmly. It shows the remarkable quality of his mind that he does understand this point. And he develops it further in a soliloquy. This is on page 81. So this is still Act 4, Scene 1. Let's pick it up at about line 241. What infinite heart's ease must kings neglect that private men enjoy. Now remember, this is what we heard his father saying. Father saying, I can't sleep, my meanest subject can sleep, isn't it preferable to be a private man? And Henry V examines, what are the compensations? Line 243, and what have kings that privates have not too, save ceremony, save general ceremony? And what art thou, thou idle ceremony? What kind of God art thou, that suffers more of moral griefs than do thy worshippers? What are thy rents? What are thy comings in? O ceremony, show me but thy worth. What is thy soul of adoration? Art thou aught else but place, degree, and form, creating awe and fear in other men, wherein thou art less happy, being feared, than they in fearing? What drinkst thou oft, instead of homage sweet, but poison flattery? O be sick, greatness, and bid thy ceremony give thee cure. Now remember what Falstaff said, can honor set a leg? Henry makes the same point here. This, to conceptualize the speech, picture Hotspur giving Falstaff's speech on honor, because that's how weird this is. A man who's living for honor, who's going to give a great speech in favor of honor, the St. Crispin's Day speech. Nevertheless, he understands the way in which honor is hollow. It can't cure a body. And again, as we see again and again in these plays, from the perspective of the body, the health of the body, the safety of the body, honor just appears crazy. It's crazy spiritedness. And as I've said from the beginning, the point about Henry is he can commit himself to anything and yet retain a kind of philosophical detachment on it. He's committed to ceremony. He's committed to the kingship. He's committed to this battle. He's committed to honor and glory. He's going to risk his life for them. Yet I think Shakespeare shows it important that he, unlike a Hotspur, Henry has some perspective on this. He's willing to see, there's something hollow about this crown. And again, he can realize it before someone had to take it away from him to show him that. So we really see the remarkable characteristic of this man, quite simply the thoughtfulness of him, and I'll say the unprovoked thoughtfulness. He doesn't have to be stripped naked to see that the emperor has no clothes. Finally, in this very long scene, I'll just look briefly at Henry's prayer on page 83. So this is Act 4, Scene 1, about line 294. I confess not to understand this moment. I try very hard to figure out what's going on in these plays, but sometimes when they continue to puzzle me, I'll just admit it. I'll just say what puzzles me about it. This is, in a way, a very important moment because it's a soliloquy that ought to reflect Henry's religious beliefs. Most of his religious statements occur in public, and there's a political reason behind them, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the end of Act 4 in a minute. This ought to be a very important moment in that we ought to see what Henry's true religious beliefs are here, because he's praying to God and he's alone. And surely that says something about the sincerity of his religious beliefs. Nevertheless, there's some very strange touches in this speech that do not make it conventionally pious. For one thing, he addresses a God of battles. It's a rather non-sectarian address. He does not address his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for example. If anything, this seems to be an Old Testament God, since it's a God of battles. By the way, to add to the peculiarity, if you turn back to page 57, so Act 3, Scene 5, line 15, the Constable of France addresses or apostrophizes God of battles. I don't know what that connection, in French, they don't know what that connection is meant to be. Let me put it this way, this is not a particularly Christian speech. O God of battles, steel my soldiers' hearts, possess them not with fear. All he wants is fierce soldiers. Line 295, take from them now the sense of reckoning, or the opposed numbers pluck their hearts from them. Just don't let them think about how outnumbered they are. Not today, O Lord, not today, think not upon the fault my father made in compassing the crown. He's asking God to disregard morality. Don't think about the fault here. And then he, gets very literal here. I, Richard's body, have interred new, and on it have bestowed more contrite tears, than from it issued forced drops of blood. 500 poor I have in yearly pay. This is getting pretty mercenary in dealing with your God. Look, I got 500 poor I'm praying for. Who twice a day, whom I support while they pray to you, who twice a day their withered hands hold up toward heaven to pardon blood. And I built 2 chantries where the sad and solemn priest sings still for Richard's soul. More will I do, though all that I can do is nothing worth, since that my penitence comes after all imploring pardon. This is strangely parallel to a scene Shakespeare was soon to write in Hamlet, where Claudius, a villain, gets on his knees and prays to God, and then realizes at the end he can't be forgiven because he still has the throne that he usurped by killing Hamlet's father. Again, I just don't know what to make of this whole speech or its role in the play. I'll just point out there are a number of very odd aspects to it that it suggests it's not all that pious, and in particular that it's not all that Christian a pair. And it would have been very easy for Shakespeare to have revealed very Christian sentiments in Henry at this point, but for whatever reason he chooses not to do so. And indeed, a few pages later, Henry's going to be saying, "But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive." Indeed, it's worth noting that having had that moment of quasi-penitence, Henry delivers the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, which is on pages 88 to 89. St. Crispin's Day is October 25th, which happens to be my birthday. St. Crispin, the patron saint of overweight Jewish intellectuals. And we do need all the help we can get. So remember me on next St. Crispin's Day. And this is a very famous speech. But as I said, but if it, lines 28 to 29, but if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive. And indeed, this whole speech is geared towards the honor of his troops. The whole point is how much pride these men will be able to take in having fought at the Battle of Agincourt. This is page 88, Act 4, Scene 3, line 41. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named and rouse him at the name of Crispin. And they're all going to become famous. Line 51, then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhood cheap, whilst any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. And there's that subtle carrot along with the stick of honor. You don't want to be ashamed of yourself. You want to be honorable. But it be ne'er so vile this day shall gentle his condition, ennoble his rank. You will be rewarded. And it's very important that Henry makes sure that everyone's got a personal stake in this battle. That the nobles will gain wealth and they'll gain titles, new titles. They'll become even bigger, have bigger titles than they have now. And everybody will get something out of this. And be he ne'er so vile. As I showed you, the French commanders never address the common people in their armies. But Henry does. If you go back to page 45, it was there already in the earlier campaign at Harfleur. This is page 45, Act 3, Scene 1, line 29. For there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble luster in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. Great image for Thumas there. These dogs just waiting to go have the slip, and in this case, chase after the game. Henry knows how to speak to the common people. Again, that's what he learned in East Cheap. He knows what they're looking for. He knows the appeal of honor to them, but also the appeal of gentling their condition and coming out better. So let's turn now to the Battle of Agincourt. Now, let me fill you in on the military background here, which Shakespeare ignores really completely, why the British won this battle. They were extraordinarily outnumbered. At a minimum, they're outnumbered 10 to 1. And there are estimates that place their disadvantage even greater than that. They won with a technological improvement, namely armor-piercing longbows, armor-piercing arrows. The way they won this battle was to set up stakes to funnel the French cavalry into a killing field. The French were relying on their cavalry. This is what medieval warfare was about, knights in shining armor. If you have this signet, this cover is very useful because it shows what it was to be a knight in shining armor. They needed pulley and tackle to get you up on the horse, and you were invincible while you were up on that horse, but if they got you off the horse, you couldn't move. The armor was too heavy. If you're interested, there's a very good discussion by a military historian of the Battle of Agincourt in this book by John Keegan called The Face of Battle. Keegan is one of the best military historians, and he has a very good chapter on explaining this battle. Basically, the English had very superior bows made of the yew trees, and they were very powerful. And it reached the point where the armor, medieval armor, was pretty strong, but using these bows, they could pierce armor with arrows. There's History Channel shows. You can watch some crazy guys today restage the thing, and you can see the arrows really do pierce the armor. So this is one of those moments in military history when there's a technological change and one army wins because it brought it about and the other wasn't prepared for it. Be like the appearance of Gatling guns in the Civil War, and then how that translated into machine guns in World War I. Every once in a while something comes along that simply changes the terms of battle. I mentioned gunpowder and firearms in connection with Henry IV, Part 1. But the British basically won the Battle of Agincourt by the superior power of their yeoman archers. It was not their knights in shining armor that won the battle. It was their archers. And the French just dumbly rode again and again into this killing field and just got killed. That's why the numbers are so staggering. As they reported, only 25 English die and like 5,000 Frenchmen die. Evidently, that's pretty much what happened at this battle. It is all, generals are always fighting the last war, we say. And so the French are in the Middle Ages, and the English have entered the modern age with their technological superiority. It's a bit odd that Shakespeare doesn't even allude to this aspect of the battle, which was well known, and it's in there in Holinshed in the Chronicles. I think he wanted this to appear not to be a technological matter, but Henry, of course, attributes the entire victory to God, as what we'll see in a minute. But in any case, I think Shakespeare wants to show that the English are politically better. The English are a modern centralized monarchy with all their people united behind a king, and that's why they defeat these aristocratic Frenchmen. But anyway, in case you were puzzled by the numbers here, there is a historical explanation of why the British did so well at Agincourt, despite being outnumbered so heavily. Now, there is one particularly important aspect of this battle, and that is the execution of the French prisoners. So you'll see on page 97. So this is Act 4, Scene 7, about line 33. Henry is hearing about the loss of some of his nobles and is having one of his touchy-feely, tender moments here. Line 32, I blame you not. For hearing this, I must perforce compound with mistful eyes. Well, they will issue to. He's actually tearing up on the battlefield. But hark! What new alarm is the same? The French have reinforced their scattered men. Then every soldier kill his prisoners. Now, this is a remarkable moment. I'll explain why, but having him give the order to execute his prisoners. Now, this was a very difficult moment in the battle. The great goal of medieval warfare was to capture prisoners, and especially capture nobles in order to ransom them. It was very easy. Once you got a knight off his horse, he couldn't move, and you dragged him off, and you sold him back to his people. It's one reason the nobles go into the war. They hope to capture knights from the other side and make a lot of money off it. medieval warfare turned around this idea of ransoming prisoners. So to give this order is extraordinary. Now, it's extraordinary circumstances. Henry's been outnumbered from the beginning. He seems to be winning, and they've taken lots of prisoners, but now they got the problem. They're not just outnumbered by the French, they're even outnumbered by the prisoners they've taken. They've done so well, they've gotten so many prisoners that Henry feels here that if the French are coming back for more, he could get trapped, his whole army could get trapped between the attacking French and the French prisoners in the rear. So he orders them killed. Now, by the way, this would not be very pleasing to hear from Henry's own nobles, because that's like killing your own meal ticket. They're adding up how much money they're going to get for the Duke of Orleans and the Duke of Alençon, and now they're told they got to kill him, and there'll be no ransom. But beyond that, there's a serious, serious moral issue here. I mean, this is violating the Geneva Convention. I mean, to this day, this would be a war crime. And many people were sentenced to death at the Nuremberg trials for killing Germans killing American prisoners during World War II. This is very much frowned upon to this day. But however much it's frowned upon today, square that, and you have the medieval feelings. This is as unchivalric an act as is imaginable. I'm talking about the Middle Ages, knights in shining armor, chivalry. Absolutely at the core of chivalry was you didn't execute prisoners. It's violating your oath. Again, it's as unchivalric as can be. I want to read to you what Keegan says about this passage in The Face of Battle. This is a modern military historian assessing this moment. Comprehensible in harsh tactical logic. That is, this decision to kill the prisoners was comprehensible in harsh tactical logic. In ethical, human, and practical terms, much more difficult to understand. Henry, a Christian king, was also an experienced soldier and versed in the elaborate code of international law governing relations between a prisoner and his captor. Its most important provision was that which guaranteed the prisoner his life. The only return, after all, for which you would enter into anything so costly and humiliating as a ransom bargain. Why in the world would anyone surrender as a prisoner if he was going to be killed? The whole logic of these battles depended upon the sanctity of prisoners. And while his treachery broke that immunity, that is, if a prisoner tried to escape, then you could kill him. While his treachery broke that immunity, the mere suspicion, even if well-founded, that he was about to commit treason could not justify his killing. King can say no Machiavellian preemptive strikes. If a prisoner tries to escape, you can kill him, but you can't say, I think he's going to try to escape, therefore I'll kill him. At a more fundamental level, moreover, the prisoner's life was guaranteed by the Christian commandment against murder. However much more closely that commandment was interpreted in the 15th century. If Henry could give the order, and as he did, escape the reproval of his peers, of the church, and of the chroniclers, we must presume it was because the battlefield itself was still regarded as a sort of moral no man's land, and the hour of battle as a legal dies non. Dies non is a day when the court's not in session. Court's never in session on the battlefield. So here's a modern historian very much questioning what Henry does. If you look on page 158, if you have the signet, here's what Holinshed says about it. Bottom paragraph on 158. But when the outcry of the lackeys and boys, which ran away for fear of the Frenchmen that spoiled the camp, came to the king's ears, he, doubting lest his enemies should gather together again and begin a new field, and mistrusting further that the prisoners would be an aid to his enemies, or the very enemies to their takers indeed, if they were suffered to live, contrary to his accustomed gentleness, commanded by sound of trumpet, that every man upon pain of death should incontinently slay his prisoner. Now, Holinshed finds it out of character for Henry. Now, gentleness here, it has some of the connotations it does today. Someone's gentle, someone's merciful, but it really has more of the sense of his being a gentleman, to his customary gentlemanliness, to his nobility. Hollinshead finds it peculiar. Notice he has to say to his own men, execute them on pain of death. Again, there would be a reluctance on the part of these nobles to kill the prisoners. They were trying to get as many as they could to get as much money out of the battle. So this is a very difficult moment here. It's the opposite of the moment when Henry, in all his nobility, lets Bardolph be executed and tells his soldiers to be gentle, to behave themselves. He does something here far worse than any of his soldiers did. This is that tiger in warfare. He's been threatening to unloose it. He finally does here. It is in the moment of greatest necessity here. Henry feels he's about to lose everything. He's threatened with the loss of the battle, the loss of his own life, the loss of all of his men, the loss of England's possessions in France, perhaps the loss of England itself to the French. This is the kind of thing that sometimes happens in battle. It is a moral no man's land, as Keegan calls it, and so he does. I want to stress how terrible this moment is. Now, it's so terrible that Olivier omits it from his film completely. Olivier was writing a patriotic film during World War II about how great the English were, and he was not going to show him violating the Geneva Convention of its day here. So people have shied away from this moment, seeing it as incompatible with the portrait of Henry's greatness. Now, Shakespeare, though, gives it an extra twist. We've just heard the order, and then we get the scene with Llewellyn and Gower, where Llewellyn comes out. This is the bottom of page 97, so Act 4, Scene 7, line 1. Kill the boys and the luggage, 'tis expressly against the law of arms, 'tis an arrant, a piece of knavery, mark you now. Now what's happened here is, in their various attempts to attack, the French trying to envelop the English have attacked where they were keeping their supplies, and where there were just some boys, and they've killed those boys. And Llewellyn says it's expressly against the law of arms. It is daring of Shakespeare to bring up the issue of the law of arms at this point. We have just seen Henry V violate the law of arms at a much deeper and more fundamental level in executing his prisoners. But if you have any doubts about this, Shakespeare reminds you there's such a thing as the law of arms here, and it's arrant and knavery to break them. And then we get that long discussion we looked at already about Alexander the Pig and Alexander the Great, and I think it's delaying things, putting a little space in here between Henry's ordering the murder of the prisoners and Henry's ordering of the murder of prisoners. Very strange thing on page 99. So still in Act 4, Scene 7, line 56. I was not, the king speaking, I was not angry since I came to France until this instant. Take a trumpet, herald. Ride thou unto the horsemen on yon hill. If they will fight with us, bid them come down. Avoid the field. They do offend our sight. If they'll do neither, we will come to them and make them skirt away as swift as stones and force it from the old Assyrian slings. Besides, we'll cut the throats of those we have, and not a man of them that we shall take shall taste our mercy. Go and tell them so. Now, this appears to be a second order to kill the prisoners. Now, one could debate the details of it. There's nothing like this in the sources that I've been able to find. I read you the one passage from Hollinshead where there's a single moment and a single order to kill the prisoners. This appears to be a second order to do so. Branagh, for example, has this, but not the first order to kill the prisoners. Olivier omits both. Branagh, as I recall, has one and has this one. Now, This is a much more acceptable order to kill the prisoners because it's in response to something nasty the French did. That is, Henry is reacting to what Fluellen and Gower were just reacting, the murder of these boys in the luggage train. And he says, I was not angry since I came to France. When I was talking way back, months ago, 60 inches of snow ago, on Hotspur and his anger, and how anger gets out of control. Someone asked me, but Henry gets angry, citing this moment. And it's an interesting, I just wonder if this isn't another act. Henry is so good at turning it off and on. And it would be very convenient for him, for the military historians to say, oh, you know, that order to kill the French prisoners, that was a response to their attack on the luggage train, and Henry got really angry about that, so he gave the order. The first order is a cold calculation, a cold-blooded calculation, fairly characteristic of the Henry V we've gotten to know. This makes it seem like a more spontaneous response, and indeed is a response. And remember, Henry's strategy is always to make his actions seem like responses. I didn't want to attack France. I was told to do it, and then the French provoked me. I didn't want to kill these nobles, but they told me not to be merciful. If Harfleur is raped and pillaged, it's not my fault, it's theirs, and so on and so forth. He always is trying to contrive things, so he's reacting. Now, again, I'm not convinced of what's going on here, but one possibility is that this is an even further layer of Machiavellian calculation here, that I've had to give this great order. Well, wait a minute, now the French have attacked my luggage. If only I could have waited a few minutes, I would have had a better reason for executing the French prisoners. Well, wait a minute, why don't I give the order again, and maybe in the confusion of battle, no one will notice. It's a very interesting moment in that sense. It may be, I mean, the decision to murder the prisoners is Henry's most Machiavellian moment. Shakespeare may be taking it to a higher level here by showing Henry trying to paper over the full nastiness of what he did by making it seem to be a response. Now, I should say that, well, frankly, almost no one has noticed these two orders. I'm not the only one who has, but this is generally ignored in the criticism. It would be typical of many critics to say, oh, this is just a problem with the text. Shakespeare didn't know where to play. He originally wrote Act 4, Scene 6, and then he decided, oh, Henry's order should be in response to what the French did, not before it. Therefore, he wrote this other scene, and somehow the two scenes got printed by some drunken printer. And there are more, the texts are bad enough, so things like that do happen. There are other moments like this in Shakespeare. There's the famous double revelation of Portia's death in Julius Caesar, for example. Before dismissing this as a printer's error, I do try to think it through, and I think it's set up, especially with this intervening scene here. I think Shakespeare wants a gap here between the two moments and make us think through what Henry's doing. Now, I will take it another notch and say that there's something actually moral about what Henry does in this scene. He has had to do a terrible thing. In the midst of war, he has had to violate the deepest principles he stands for. He's not happy, I believe, about having done that, and therefore reaches for the first opportunity to give at least a better moral coloring to what he did, to present it as a response to something the French did and not a spontaneous act of Machiavellian cruelty. Now, again, you could say this is even more Machiavellian, to try to give a moral color to what you did out of pure necessity. But it is conceivable that what Shakespeare's showing here is that all things considered, it's better to present your actions as moral, even in retrospect. What I notice here is a certain reticence in Henry about his Machiavellianism. It may make him even more Machiavellian. I wish we had read Shakespeare's Richard III, his most Machiavellian villain, who even talks about Machiavelli, that he'll set the murderous Machiavel to school. Maybe some of you know Richard III. Maybe some of you know characters like Iago, and we'll see Edmund when we do King Lear. A lot of Shakespeare's villains really enjoy their villainy. And they love to talk to us, the audience, about it. They take great pride in their villainy. They basically just address us saying, wasn't I villainous? Wasn't that, I just killed my grandmother. It was so much fun. Wasn't that great? How easily I killed my own grandmother. Or things like, they do horrible things and then praise it to the skies. Henry has done a horrible thing here, but I think we may say it's to his credit that he doesn't trumpet it. He doesn't say, I took care of those Frenchmen. We almost lost this battle. If I hadn't executed those Frenchmen, we would have lost it. There's a lot of you weak-kneed guys out there who wouldn't have had the guts to kill those Frenchmen, but I did it. Believe me, Richard III in these circumstances would be telling us at great length how much fun it was to kill the Frenchmen, and how he'd do it again, and he'll do it next Wednesday. I think it's interesting that Henry very quickly tries to downplay what he did and suggests, I did it out of anger. I did it in response to what happened to the boys. And of course, very quickly, we're hearing a different motif entirely. Page 100, so Act 4, Scene 7, line 89. The day is yours, he hears from French. Praise be God, and not our strength for it. This becomes a strong motif here, where Henry denies that he should get any credit for this. He tells his soldiers don't take credit for it. Now, before the battle, in the St. Crispin's Day speech, he told them, you're going to take all the credit in the world for this. You're going to be talking about this for the rest of your lives. You're going to have people spellbound in every pub in England listening to how great you were at the Battle of Agincourt. But not here. The first thing he starts saying is, this is, look at page 107. This is Act 4, Scene 8, line 108. O God, thy arm was here, and not to us, but to thy arm alone ascribe you all, when without stratagem. As I've explained historically, it was quite a stratagem that allowed the English to win against such great odds. Now again, it's very hard to figure out what's going on here. I'm just offering you a hypothesis that what Shakespeare is suggesting is that Henry V knows when you have to do the evil thing in the middle of battle and at the total crisis when everything's at stake. But he also knows you better not trumpet that fact. Make as little out of it as possible. In a way, I put it this way, Henry does not want to erase the line between war and peace. I like Keegan's line that war is a moral no man's land, and it's the place where the court isn't in session. There's a great truth to that. But there's a real question whether politics can be governed by the case of war as opposed to peace, or you could say in general whether politics can be covered by the extreme case. That is, do you take your bearings in politics from normal everyday life, which means, among other things, peacetime, or do you take your bearings from the exception? And I think Shakespeare acknowledges there are exceptions. There are going to be exceptions when the moral rules just can't apply. If your whole country is threatened, you may have to do a very, very nasty thing. But you want to keep that as an exception. It's no accident, for example, that the great Nazi theorist Carl Schmitt had a theory of exceptionalism, that his whole political theory is based on the idea of the great political exceptions, and it's on the basis of that he defended the dictatorial rule of Hitler, the case of the exception. Shakespeare is very quiet about that. Again, Richard III comes out at the beginning of his play, Richard III, and speaks about this piping time of peace and is really complaining, we're not at war anymore. It used to be so great in war. I could do anything I wanted in war, but now we're in peace and supposed to go to dances, and I got this hunchback, and I'm really not too good at dancing. I wish we were back in war. So I'm going to stir things up again and we'll get war again. Anyway, I think this is a very interesting moment here. I'm offering you one interpretation of it, that the second orders they are designed to give the teaching, if you ever do anything like this, like Henry does here, don't talk about it. Don't try to publicly defend it. You'll only work to erase that line between war and peace. You'll only suggest to other people to do evil things and to claim necessity when there really was no necessity. Okay, got 2 minutes here. Any questions about this? Yes?
Your interpretation, who are you trying to play cruelty down to?
Yeah. Yeah, no, his own nobles, his own people, right, that you don't want to get up and give a speech, by the way, I want you to see, I just had you execute the French prisoners spontaneously of my own volition, and I had to do it, it was necessity, and sometimes kings have to do things like that. That would not be a good public teaching at this point. Much better to be quiet about it. In fact, to have tried to make it appear at least a little more moral in response to the French and out of anger, and then start saying, oh, God was behind all this. It's a kind of post-sanctification of really the most evil thing he's done in his lifetime, even in the terms of the day then, and maybe even more extraordinarily in the terms of the day then. Yes? No, there wasn't, and Keegan makes that point. And even Hounshead, just says, "Gee, this wasn't like him." And again, I mean, I would defend him to this day for it, presumably people were willing to accept it, especially in the English histories. I've never seen a French history at this moment. Oh. Oh. Okay, well, that's really, that is the French historians defended Henry on this. That's what Keegan implies, and again, it may have something to do with the way Henry carried himself after the battle. We'll see this when we get to Edmund and King Lear. Shakespeare's real Machiavellian villains are too proud of their Machiavellianism, and they really just praise themselves for doing evil things. Okay, I got to exactly where I wanted to get to. Next time, we will bring you Henry V. We will cover Act 5, Henry V. I will talk about the wooing scene there. It'll be a wonderful introduction to the subject of love and Romeo and Juliet. And I will speak about Act 3, Scene 4, the only scene entirely in French in the play, and one of the great puzzles in it. I want to say something about that. And then we will move on to Romeo and Juliet next time.